Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Paperback Possibility Podcast. If you're new here, this is the podcast where me, Ashley, and this guy, Alfie,
that's me.
We sit and we say, hello.
Hello.
What two books would you like to read? Or which one of these two books would you like to read next month? And the other person answers. So we had a possibility at the end of the last podcast to read two books, and one of them was The Watchers by A.M. Shine.
Mm-hmm.
Is it The Watchers or Watchers?
It's The Watchers.
It is The Watchers. Now, Alfie has read this book before.
I've read it twice now.
But he pitched it to us. We wanted a little bit of a Halloween read, something a bit scarier.
Read.
And so, therefore, we opted for this one. I can't remember what the other one was.
The Witch of Tin Mountain. But
Yeah.
I forget the author.
They were both a little bit Halloween-y.
Yeah.
And we're back today with our comprehensive-ish review.
Our views.
Of
My
The
review's on the
Watchers.
second time of reading.
Yes, which is really interesting because I think that does change quite a
Definitely.
lot. So this book, if you hadn't heard of The Watchers before, it is set in Ireland.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that until about 25 pages in. So, you know, it's not like integral to the plot, but it does help when you start imagining all the characters with Irish accents, I think.
I think it's more you just imagine a place where it's wet and there are forests.
Yeah.
So it could be set on like, you know, the northwest coast of America or
Wales.
like Wales or Scotland or like the
Forks.
yeah, whatever. You know.
This is a spine-chilling Irish horror adventure set in the remote and sinister forests of Ireland from debut Irish author A.M. Shine. Now, this was A.M. Shine's first
ever full book.
It is a shorter book. I don't think they class it as a novella. I think it is a book.
Yeah, it's 270 pages.
Yes.
Which is a full novel.
Just
about.
Just about.
Yeah, he's skimping the line, but he got there.
And it is now also a major motion picture by M. Night Shyamalan.
So he produced it, but his sister directed it.
And it's got Dakota Fanning in it.
Yeah, the famous Dakota Fanning, who is one of those actors who's... You'd be like, what? That's a name I know. I know that Dakota Fanning is a person, but if someone said, what's a Dakota Fanning movie? I'd be like, no idea.
The Watchers.
Don't even know what she looks like.
So we haven't watched the film. I want to. Alfie doesn't. So I think I might be watching that one on my own.
Yeah.
The forest isn't charted on any map. Every car breaks down at its tree line. Mina's is no different. Left stranded, she is forced into the dark woodland only to find a woman shouting, urging Mina to run to a concrete bunker. As the door slams behind her, the building is besieged by screams. She finds herself in a room with a wall of glass and an electric light that activates at nightfall when the Watchers come above ground. These creatures emerge to observe their captive humans, and terrible things happen to anyone who doesn't reach the bunker in time. Afraid and trapped among strangers, Mina is desperate for answers. Who are the Watchers, and why are they keeping the humans imprisoned? Keen to watch their every move. I think this book for me, without giving too much away, because you told me this and it didn't give anything away, I think it maybe dropped 2 points because of the ending.
I think it drops most of the points because of the ending.
So this book, read all the way through for me, is a 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
I had little picky plot holes that I found that probably are explainable, and we were discussing it yesterday, and they are explainable.
Yeah.
Not through the book, but just through like chatting about it. And the ending I found really let this down. So let's get to that. Let's talk about the book. I think this is a masterclass in writing.
Yep.
I think A.M. Shine and his technique in writing is so nice.
It's so good. It's when... So a lot of books that I personally find very confusing to follow. And I think that happens when you use really flowery language throughout. When you use like unnecessarily flowery language. I'll cast us back to one of the books we read very early on, which was the ghost story at the start of the year.
The Whistling.
The Whistling. Lots of really flowery language and a lot of like unnecessary language. So I actually found it quite difficult to follow which character was which character. So I ended up just kind of not really paying attention and just trying to just follow the general plot through the story. Whereas this, it's very, very well written. It's very concise. and he does away with a lot of the needless fat that I think a lot of authors tend to leave in their books, which is why it does end up being a bit shorter. It's less than 300 pages, but that is absolutely to its benefit. I actually think it should be maybe slightly shorter than that, because I think it should end before it actually ends, because then you could just stop the book before it gets to the actual ending, which is horrendous. But
which is our personal taste.
I don't think. Yes, it is our personal taste, but I would also say that is an objectively bad ending. And it's difficult to say without spoiler, but we'll get to it. But it's a very particular trope that people use that I hate in any media, and he uses it here completely shamelessly. He must have known, as a writer, you must know that that's what you're doing, and it was just awful. I hated it. But everything up to that, until like the last 3 pages, I think is absolutely brilliant.
Let's talk about some of this language. I like to highlight bits in Kindle books, because you can highlight them and come back to them, and I like doing that for the podcast. The one thing in particular that I was looking at was this line, which is from, I don't know whereabouts in the book it is. It's, I can tell you. It's on page 63, so it's quite early on. It doesn't really give any spoilers, but light spoiler warning throughout the rest of the podcast, and then towards the end we will obviously discuss it in a lot more detail.
I think before we do this, quick recommendation. Do you think people should read this book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Go and read this book. It's really good.
And then stop at about 95% of the way through.
Yeah, and just stop. And just leave it.
Just turn it off.
Yeah.
Just no.
Anyway,
just no.
Continue.
Stepping outside was never easy, especially when that low fog brooded over the earth. It clung to Daniel's jeans, steeped through the denim and under his skin, squeezing the bones with its icy hands. I think that's just like one of those lines that I just was like, oh, I really like how he does that.
It's flowery, but it's clear he's clearly saying something with a purpose.
It's to make you so aware of the atmosphere.
And how cold it is.
It's
physically cold it is, but also by describing it as like this sort of invasive thing that gets into you, it just adds to it, and it's really good.
I agree. I think overall the book's concept is something that I personally rock with quite a lot. So we read a book earlier this year called Stranded. Actually, it was before the podcast. I think it was when we started reading last year.
Yeah, that was last year.
And it's a book called Stranded by Sarah Goodwin. I really like books that are isolations away from humanity, and people have to survive in whatever. And I love media like this as well. Lost, I wrote my dissertation on Lost, so that's like a whole thing of my favorite genres. But this book really hits home on the human sort of desire and need to keep going, even in the most horrible circumstances.
When survival is survival's sake.
Yeah. And Mina is our protagonist. We have a little bit of a prologue, and then we go into it with Mina. Mina, her whole thing is that she has to deliver this golden conure.
This is the most bizarre setup for a plot. This is you were telling me about this yesterday, and how that setup doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah. So this book is set in 2019. Let's just get that out of the way. It's a 2019 book. She has been tasked by one of her pub friends to go and deliver this bird. It's a golden conure. They make it very clear that this book is yellow gold. That's one of my problems, but that's a personal problem. We'll get to that in a second. This bird is to go to this mysterious dealer. So her pub friend gives her a map, a physical map. It's 2019, a physical map, and says, here you go, follow this map, and then you'll get to the place where you're supposed to go. And Mina's driving away in her car. At not one point in this book did they think, maybe, Google Maps exists. Other map providers are available. And anyway.
But also it's just like, she does it just to like make like quick money.
Yeah, it's like she earns €200, I think. Yeah. To go and deliver this bird. That makes sense. That's fine. Like, she's someone who has a working position of, she gets paid when she's an artist, so she works on commissions. And she's driving along with this bird.
Yeah.
She's goes to the forest. She hits the edge of the forest, and her car breaks down. But it's
inexplicably.
It's more than that. It's more than her car breaking down. It's like the air is still. There are no sounds. There are no creatures. The bird starts going absolutely like haywire and isn't really understanding what's going on. So in this, I don't really want to pick holes this early on in the podcast. So I'll say my problem and I'll move on.
All the holes are at the start of the book.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. My problem right here is Mina decides to take the bird, takes her bag, goes into the forest. As someone who has read a lot of survival and probably I feel like I've got a little bit of common sense about me, there doesn't, and tell me if I'm wrong if you've read the book and there is a discernible reason, there doesn't seem to be a discernible reason why she decides to head straight into the woods. I would turn around and walk up the road. If say the road you cannot go any further, say there's a fallen tree, say there's like something stopping you from going ahead on this road that you are going on, why would you turn around? Why wouldn't you turn around and walk backwards?
I think something that's quite interesting is reading the blurb that I can see here. The third sentence is, left stranded, she is forced into the dark woodland. But
she's not.
She's not forced, so she just decides to walk into
Yeah.
it. There's no reason for her to walk into it because she could quite easily just turn around and walk back up the road.
Yeah.
Instead of going, I'm just going to walk into this mess of trees. I'm just going to turn around and walk back to the main road and just hope there's another car, which is the more sensible option to do.
Absolutely.
But for some reason, she just decides to walk into the forest. So I think I completely agree that is a massive thing that just doesn't make any sense. For the other characters, their reasons for being there, I think, do make more sense than Mina's.
Yeah, we discussed it, and they all seem to have like a reason that we could suspend disbelief and just say, well, okay, that kind of makes sense.
I can get
they're
behind
there.
that.
But Mina's, I don't get. Anyway,
She just like, well, don't know what else I'll do. I guess I'll just walk into this foreboding forest
with a bird
with my
in a cage.
giant bird cage.
So she's walking along with this cage, and suddenly she hears a massive screaming, and this woman, who we learn is called Madeline, is ushering her into this house that has a light that's like about to come, and she's saying, the light's about to go on, you have to get in. And Mina's like, well, I bet I get a run then. So she starts running. She runs and gets in the house, and there is a couple of people in there. There is Madeline, who is a tall, older woman. We've got a smaller boy who's a bit greasy, ratty looking. His name is Daniel. He's a boy. He's 19.
He's boyish though.
He's very young in nature, and we learn why.
Yeah.
And then also there is Kira. Kira is a
sleeping,
very traditional Irish character, like flaming red hair, bright green eyes. And what we learn is the prologue that we spoke about earlier. She was actually featured in the prologue with her partner, John. The place that they're in, they call it the coop. There is a mirrored window, or several mirrored windows, depends on how you read it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I sort of saw it as like one panel. But
something that we were discussing yesterday is the description of the building is
confusing.
Yeah, either deliberately or undeliberately is quite vague.
Yeah.
And so it's quite difficult to actually, I just sort of imagined it in my head as I imagined it, but I don't know if that that would correlate to like how, say, you imagined it to look like, which is one of the reasons why I don't really want to watch the movie, because I don't want that to mess with my perception of it, because I'll just go, no, that's wrong, even though it's not wrong, because I think the description of it is a bit bizarre. But it is essentially just like a concrete room, maybe another room, or like an outer room, or like a gazebo part that's where the fire is, and then, you know, and then the forest beyond that. So
and because it's indoors and safe from the Watchers, which we spoke about in the blurb. But also there seems to be like an outdoor living room with a fire pit, which is kind of indoors and outdoors, and they have to get to it.
They describe it as being outdoors. They describe it as being indoors, but like it's explicitly said that it's outdoors.
Yes.
But it doesn't. There's a part later in the book where it's like, how is this outdoors?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it's a bit weird. I'd like to see AM Shine like actually just draw it.
I would love that.
What did it actually look like? Because I feel like it's not really very clear.
We have the course of the book. We're not going to go into massive details, but we learn a lot about the past of Daniel, Kira. We don't learn anything about Madeline. She's a woman who really keeps to herself. She's been there for the longest amount of time, which is only like 2.5 years, but that's still a long time to be in this place.
Yeah, barely surviving.
They have to stay awake all night, because if they don't stay awake, the Watchers get a bit restless, and they are like these creatures, and we haven't seen them. And throughout most of the book, we don't see them.
It's the classic don't show the monster horror, where we don't really ever know exactly what they look like, mostly because the characters don't really look at them.
Yeah.
And we only really see them at nighttime when it's completely dark anyway.
And the glass is mirrored, so they can only see themselves. They can't see out.
Yeah, they can't see out, but they can hear them.
Yeah.
And there are certain parts in the book where we do like kind of get to a description of them, but it's always very vague.
So over the course of the book, we have to kind of discern through Mina. The book's told third person, and it does sort of jump around between all the perspectives, but the book is mainly through Mina, and we have to learn whether or not we can really trust everyone, and whether or not the Watchers are real. And the only real reason we have to know that they exist is the noises that they make. We are going out throughout the days, we're getting water, we're scavenging for food.
Yeah.
Daniel is climbing trees to try and find birds, because it's made very clear that no animals are coming close to the forest.
They know to stay away.
They are staying away like there is no tomorrow. They are staying very, very far away. And we also learn Mina's an artist, right? We said she does commissions, but she also has a sketchbook that she goes and she draws around in. She's talked about some notable people that she has sketched, and she is trying to sort of ground herself in this newfound experience by sketching people. And when she's on her treks, she volunteers solely to go and get water from the spring, which is a little while away. It's a little trek away. And as she is going backwards and forwards to the spring every day, she realizes that the coop that they are in is surrounded by burrows. And we are starting to think that these Watchers might live in the burrows.
Yeah.
Madeline, who has been there the longest, she is like giving away so little. She doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't really want to have anything to do with Mina or any of the other characters, and she treats Daniel and Kira like absolute dirt.
Yeah.
She is there
Particularly
to survive.
Daniel. Yeah.
Daniel as well has come from a background of abuse, so he doesn't get on with Madeline very well because he sees a lot of his father in her. So for content warning sakes, it doesn't really go into details with the abuse, but I would be careful if you have any sensitivity to abuse when you read this book. There is not very many more content warnings, I'd say, apart from
it's
like
very clean.
grief and loss. And this is obviously a horror book, so if you have any sensitivity to anything that would normally appear in horror, I would do your research and see if there is something.
I personally don't think this is a scary book. If I had like a scary rating from like 1 to 5, I would put this at probably 1 or 2.
I think what it is if you are someone who has a very strong imagination, it's very easy for you to put yourself in a situation. For me, imagining myself in Mina's shoes, getting completely thrown off course, put into this coop where she's stuck with 3 people that she doesn't know, and there are things that are screaming and like making horrendous noises every night. That's terrifying. On top of that, they don't know if they're ever going to make it out again.
Yeah.
And we are here in this place, a month and a half or so has passed, and we have a moment. It's our first, like, scariest moment, I think, in the book, which kind of continues to bring this realism to it. And that is that Kira, as I said, she was part of the prologue. She was there with her partner, John. I think they were husband and wife.
Yeah.
And they are driving along. John's like, let's go on an adventure. Kira says, okay, but, you know, I'd rather stay and watch TV. And John's like, no, let's go out. Let's really do something. So they go out, and they are driving along the same road that Mina was when their car breaks down, and they go into the woods to try and find their way, I suppose. John is there for quite a while. Not Mina, Kira and John are there for quite a while, and they are in this house. They meet Madeline. None of the other people are there. Daniel's not there. Mina's not there, obviously. It's just Kira, John, and Madeline. John is like desperate to try and get out, to go back to reality, so he goes on a trek for a day and a bit.
Yeah, so he kind of leaves and goes a little bit further every day, and gets a little bit further away. And so every day when he's coming back to the coop, he's very much closer and closer to like his deadline,
which is when the light comes on.
And then one day he has gone too far, and I can't make it back in time, and the light comes on, and that's the end of Jonathan.
We come back to the time it is now, where Mina, Kira, Daniel, Madeline are in the coop, and we hear these tortured screams. And obviously, the Watchers are making these sort of noises every single night. But Kira recognizes these screams, and it sounds just like her John. She is absolutely like beside herself. She's begging for them to open the door, to let her out, let John in. It's obviously not happening, and I think there's a big speculation there as to whether or not it was ever John.
Yeah.
But either way, we open the door. We don't open the door. They desperately do not open the door. And Kira is then thrown, and she is completely betrayed by Mina and Daniel, who have,
sort of had her back. Yeah.
She's sort of seen them as allies and friends, and they've both turned around to her and said, "No, we are not opening the door." Madeline, of course, she's not surprised about, because Madeline was never going to open the door, because Madeline's main instinct is to survive always. And this triggers a series of events in which one day Daniel is so ready to prove himself to Kira and say, I am your friend, actually. That was a necessity. It had to be done, but I am so desperate to prove that we are friends still. That when he's out with Madeline, checking traps and doing that kind of thing, Madeline drops the keys. She is the only person who has keys to the coop. She is clutching the keys constantly, because she goes around multiple times a day and makes sure the coop is fully locked before nightfall, when the light goes on and the Watchers come. She drops her keys. Daniel picks them up and goes and runs.
He legs it
to the coop. Sees Mina. This is the bit that confuses me with the layout. Mina is by the fire, which is in the living room, but it's outside.
Yeah, but it's not outside. I don't think it's outside. I think it's like almost like a conservatory or a porch area.
And it doesn't quite make sense in my head. But anyway, Daniel's got the keys, and he says to Mina, "Get inside now, I'm going to lock the door," and lock Madeline out. And Madeline is like tearing through. I've just thought of another thing. We'll talk about it at the end. But we see Daniel, he locks the door, he locks Mina out, he locks Madeline out, just as the light clicks on. So Madeline and Mina have to survive for as long as they can with the Watchers trying desperately to find them and kill them.
Yeah.
That's another quite scary moment. And that's
the one part to me that is like, that's a horror sequence. And it's really good. That's my favourite part of the book. I think that whole sequence is amazing. The tenseness, it's almost like you can feel the silence that they need to hold in order to stay hidden. And I don't think anything else in the book really quite reaches that height. But that sequence is so tense and so good, and it's really difficult to do in written fiction, to do that kind of like physical tenseness. But he does it really well.
And it's a moment where you're sort of like stuck, and you try and work out, are they going to survive? And you're there in that moment with them. You really do feel like that. So obviously we're talking about the book. We're obviously like discussing it as we go on. So I'm not going to say beware of spoilers, but this is where something quite changeful happens in the book. This is a turning point, because we have there's a table that they all eat at every single night, and the Watchers, Madeline and Mina, manage to get back in. Kira relents and allows
opens the door for
them to come in. So they sprint in, and at this point the Watchers have realised
they're like rabid for them,
and they are hammering on the windows and the walls to try and get in and to try and get them. And there's it's a moment of, they know that they need to protect the doors and reinforce as much as possible, because if they don't, that's the end. Like they're going to get in, and that is what it is.
One could make the argument, if we're looking at plot holes, why have the Watchers waited this long?
Because no one tried to escape.
No one tried to escape, yeah. And I think there are just a few elements where it's just like, why
now?
Why now? Why are you so? Why do you want? If they're, it's like, what's the motivation?
Yeah.
Like, they've gone rabid to try and kill them because they were outside, but now they're inside, which is what the Watchers want.
Yeah.
So why are they now trying to break through to try and get them? It doesn't really make sense, but maybe that's just part of like the monster design. Is like, we don't really understand their actual, what they want, because they're unknowable, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And we have this table. We blocked the door and see that there's like a little trapdoor, little hideaway, a little something, a little hatch underneath the table. And when the morning comes, the Watchers leave, because they are never there in the morning. As soon as the light clicks off to symbolise the morning, the Watchers are gone.
Yeah.
So they find the hatch, they go down the hatch and realise that there's essentially a bunker. And this whole building was constructed because the main guy who constructed it, his name was Kilmartin.
Mm-hmm.
He was a doctor who thought that there might be some creatures in the forest, and he wanted to find out about them. So he's constructed this whole area so that he can watch them and he can study them, because there's a button where the glass either changes from mirrored to a glass.
Like a window, yeah.
So he can either see them and they'll get reflected, or he will be reflected back to himself and they can see in.
Yeah. Two-way mirror.
Two-way mirror kind of situation. And he's really quite determined to find out what these things are. And he talks a little bit about them. We find out what they are at this point, don't we?
Yeah, so they're basically... so at this point, Mina and... throughout the book, Madeline has been kind of portrayed as this sort of villain figure. She's not really a villain, but the way she talks to everybody, she seems quite tyrannical in the way that she always holds on to the keys. She decides when they eat, she decides what they eat, she decides what all their jobs are, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them resent her like massively. But during that sequence when Mina and Madeline get locked out, Madeline really looks after Mina and like tells her what to do to stay safe and make sure that they survive just for long enough. And Mina's opinion of her changes in that moment, and she kind of understands why Madeline is the way she is, because she's been there the longest, and Madeline knows how to survive, and she knows that this particular style of leadership is what's necessary to keep everybody in line, to make sure that they can all survive for as long as possible. And Mina, having gone through that with Madeline, and then they all discover this section together, Mina basically says to her, Madeline, there's no more time for you to just hold things together. You have to just tell us what this is, because you clearly know, and we've got all this information, so we can you just need to connect the dots for us. And so she does. And Madeline basically explains that the creatures in the forest are like old school, old-timey fairy tale fairies, not like fairies like Tinkerbell, like changeling, horrible mimic creatures fairies, like the very old style of fairies that live in this forest. They only live in this forest, and there's this kind of like moment where she's like, did you ever hear those stories when you were a kid, blah blah blah, blah. And it's all that kind of thing, and Mina's like, it couldn't possibly be that, but then it obviously is. And this doctor, Kilmartin, came here because he heard the stories, he felt like there was some truth to them, so he came here to find out if it was true. Turns out it was. And Madeline tells her history, where she was a historian, like a local historian, who again heard the same rumors and basically just came to find out if they were true, and got stuck here because she realized she couldn't escape. So that's when that's kind of the shift from the unknown to the known. And then so we've, in terms of like the horror like plot line, it's like we figured out what's going on, now we have to figure out how to get out of it. And so after they get to after they've gone through the bunker, Madeline basically says the Watchers know that we've come down here, and they're not going to wait anymore. They're not going to watch us. They're going to, as soon as that light goes off, they're going to be banging on the door and they're going to be trying to get in. So we need to figure out how to leave now because we won't survive many more nights.
And
which is what
luckily,
they do.
there is a video
Yes.
that tells them exactly how to escape. Very convenient plotline.
Yeah.
And we find out that Kilmartin has... He was there to study. He knew what these creatures would be, or he had at least a very good guess. So he had positioned a boat that was a little way away, probably like an 8-hour trek throughout the day. So you had the best chance of getting out in summer. So they're thinking, like, should we wait till summer? Well, obviously they can't. This bunker does have a few supplies, so they could go for a little while. But as Madeline says, they know where they are. They're gonna get in, and they're gonna
I think
end up dead.
There's a little detail during that night when the watchers are really going crazy. They do bang on the window enough times that it starts to crack.
Yeah.
And they realise that like the window's not going to hold anymore.
And also, during this conversation and during this video that we see Dr. Kilmartin, he says that the reason why he's decided to give up is because firstly, he's really hurt his ankle, so he can't get to the boat. There's no way he can make this trek 8 hours on that foot. But when he was in there, he realised that these changeling fairy type things can sort of like assume different forms, and they would share his face back at him.
Yeah.
So he wanted to see if he could make it anyone else. And the only picture he had was of his wife and his wallet. So he showed them and they were like, they
started copying,
They only saw his wife's face back now. So every time he saw them, he would see his wife. And Madeline had said something earlier as well in the book that when she was asked by Mina what they looked like, Madeline said they look like me because they learn faces, and that's the reason why the coop was there, so that he could sort of teach them how to look.
Yeah, and he could study that as a reaction. It's like these creatures, like what do they do? Why do they do it? So if I position myself where they can see me, but they can't see themselves, what will they look like? And he saw that they turned into him.
Yeah, they had assumed his form. That position. So they make for the boat, and we're gonna put this really quickly and really briefly because it's not necessarily the most we don't really have a need to go into detail here.
No, not really.
But they do go. They get out. They get rescued. They get back to their home, and they have to deal with getting back to life. And it's mostly. Madeline disappears. Yeah,
she arrives and she's like, "Oh, this is nice," and then just leaves in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and so we focus basically on Mina and Kira at that point. Kira's gone back to her home with John. John's obviously not there anymore. He is definitely lost to the woods. And Mina is at her home, and they had a final mission from Dr. Kilmartin, who on that video said, you have to go back to the university where I'm studying, you have to destroy my research. I've ended up getting enough people killed as it is. I don't want anyone else to find my research, come to the forest and die.
Yeah.
Because he had brought in so many workers and employees who were building this coop and building this bunker, and they'd all died.
Yeah.
It was a bit H.H. Holmes, if anyone knows that story. It was very similar to that. Anyway, so Mina has decided she's going to go back to the university. She's going to find the research, and she's reading the research, and we get quite a big reveal.
The ultimate reveal, the ultimate twist of this book. So
now, at this point,
if you really aren't going to read it, that's fine. But if you have any inkling that you do want to read it, this is the twist.
This is the bit where you cannot go back. You cannot unlearn this. Yeah. Although, to be fair, I do kind of want to read it again now, knowing
which
this
is why I wanted to read it for the second time.
So, would you like to do the honours, Mr. Alfie?
So, Madeline was a fairy changeling. She's one of them the whole time. She was the form that she is so and so's wife.
Yeah, because she had died of cancer 2 years prior to Dr. Kilmartin going to the forest.
Yeah. I don't know if we have. Is there a motivation for him? Is that part of his motivation for going?
I don't. I think it's very up in the air.
It's up in the air, but one could possibly assume that he heard that these people could assume different forms. Maybe he was going there to try and recapture his wife. We don't know. It's not really important.
No, it's not.
It
It's
doesn't
not.
really matter.
It's the sort of the thing that got us into the woods.
Yeah, it's what got us there, and we learn that Madeline's or Fairy Madeline, or the Madeline that we know,
Mm-hmm.
her motivation is essentially to just live as a human. She doesn't really have any desires beyond that, but she, being a creature of these woods, basically just wants to go out and explore the world and know it and understand it, and that's what she wants to do. There's no malice in what she wants to do. She doesn't want to kill people or eat them or anything. She just wants to go out and just know the world.
And she doesn't understand as well why she isn't affected like the other Watchers. Like when the light comes on,
she's fine.
Like as in when the sun comes up, when the light goes off, she's fine. She doesn't get affected. She doesn't like run away. She's not pounding at the window screaming. She's just like,
she's different.
She's for all intents and purposes, she's a human.
Yeah.
And she's living her life. But we also, at this point, Mina has read the research and she finds out about it because she sees the picture of Kilmartin's wife. And she's like,
it's very
that's
bum
Madeline.
moment. It's good. I liked it.
It was
good.
very good.
It's executed really well, because a lot of twists like that can be really cheesy and come off like really like, oh god, cool. And it was her the whole time, but it doesn't come off like that. It comes off really like understandably, and then you look back on the book, and having read it the second time, the way that Madeline is, the sheer lack of empathy and understanding she has for the people around her, and the way that she's so specific about the way that everything has to be done. It is like how it's like someone with no real human experience would act in that way, because they're so, well, this is the only world I know, so this is how it has to be done, kind of thing.
Like, even down to them saying, like, Madeline's, and they comment on this throughout the book, Madeline's, like, eyebrows will go up and down and change, but, like, she'll never smile. Like, her face is, like, dead, essentially.
Yeah, she
like,
never smiles.
She never changes her expression. And I think that's really interesting that, like, all it is, it's not like, oh, it was a reveal, we didn't see that coming. It's like all the clues were there.
Yeah.
We didn't see it coming.
Best kind of twist.
Yeah, and it's really good.
You could have figured it out if you had a nudge in a particular direction. You could have figured it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's hidden from you that whole time, and then when it comes about, it's like, oh, of course.
Which is what I was saying about earlier, which I clicked, was when she was chasing after Daniel to get back into the thing. She's got
fairy powers.
She's got super speed. She could have got there. So she made a conscious decision
to allow that to happen.
Which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Mina has worked this out, and she goes back home and finds that her front door of her apartment has been blown open, essentially. And it's been, scratched open, shall we say.
Yeah.
And someone has got in, and she knows it's Madeline. And the only thing that's missing is Kira's address.
Yeah.
So she knows that's where Madeline is heading.
Yeah, because Kira had a USB drive.
A camera
or something like that. And Madeline's basically like, you need to destroy this evidence. You have to destroy it.
Yeah.
And Mina's like, well, you should probably destroy it, Kira. And Kira's like, well, I don't think it even works. And it's a bit of a keepsake, but people will believe nobody's going to believe me. And she's like, I've been missing for however long it's been, like months, maybe a year, up to that point. How no one's going to believe me that I was just trapped in a forest with a bunch of fairies.
Yeah.
Like, I need something to hold on to even maybe just like convince myself that actually happened, and I haven't just gone crazy. And Madeline, being the non-human that she is, it's like, well, no, that's just, you're not making any sense. You need to destroy that evidence. And so obviously Madeline goes after her.
And she does, and she goes after her. But Mina gets there first and talks to Kira and tells Kira the whole story. Like, this is what Madeline is. This is like what we've worked out in the meantime since we last saw you. And it's like there's a moment between Kira and Mina where they're like, well, what do we do? And then Madeline appears.
Walks in the door.
Now, there's another horror sequence for you where Madeline is like, you can hear her climbing on the roof, and you can hear her like circling the house, scratching and trying to like.
I love that imagery of like her being who she is, but like other parts of her, like imagining like her hands just like growing like talons and, stuff, and like not fully becoming a fairy, but just like bits of her just like elongating and stuff. I love that stuff. I think that's just good, like a little breath in the way of body horror that I really like. So yeah, I did really like that bit.
There's this whole horror sequence, and it essentially comes down to, are you going to are you going to kill us? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And they managed to appeal to the humanity that Madeline has
developed,
learned.
yeah.
And Kira and Madeline Kira and Mina, both promise that they have got rid of the evidence. Mina hasn't. It's all still at her apartment. She hasn't got rid of it. She will not get rid of it at this point. She is very convinced that that's like a bad thing to do. So it's all a bit like, let's lie to Madeline and hope for the best. And Madeline,
she goes along with it. Yeah.
To which I think the book should have ended there.
I agree, but it doesn't.
And I think up to that point, it was a really good story. It was a really good book.
There's like this subplot of like, can something that is purely copying humans
assume
humanity and learn to care?
Yeah.
Because that's what Madeline did for she was essentially their mother who kept them all safe.
And like thinking back to the coup and like even in their escape, Madeline waits for Mina everyone to get to the boat.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like she should have just gone. She should have just escaped, like realistically being the person that she is. Yeah. But she's learned humanity.
And that's really cool. And you could have just left it there. And there's all these great themes about like becoming human. Who's the most human? Is it, Blade Runner style? Are the humans like the actual humans, or is it the people who are trying to be human? All that stuff. And then you've got the horror sequences that are really good. The twist, should this research be burned, or should we know about this? All great stuff. But then A.M. Shine, for some insane reason, decides to write about 5 more pages that are just awful.
I reckon there wasn't.
I agree. I think his publisher
his publisher
made him write this.
We need a sequel to this. Yeah. You need to put something in that's going to give us the ability for a sequel.
Oh, it's so bad.
And we are going to tell you right now what it is. I highly recommend not
just don't
entertaining
don't read it,
because the book is so good up until, and yeah, we've talked about it. There are moments that I do genuinely feel like affect the book very, very slightly, in the sense that if you had just used your common sense as a person in a horror novel, you would have survived.
You would not have walked into this forest with your big bird.
Exactly. Yeah, and the bird is still alive at this point.
The bird's been there the whole time.
The bird's
been like this like weird constant like throughout the whole book. And obviously it's like the whole metaphor of like being trapped in a cage and all that stuff. And that's all fine. But it's just this weird, every chapter or so, like we just come back and it's just like, the bird's still here. The bird's still there, just squawking away.
It's interesting as well, because if we look at, if you reread it, the bird is reacting to Madeline like the whole time. Like it does not like Madeline, but we just assume that no one likes Madeline.
No one likes Madeline. The bird, even the bird doesn't like Madeline.
Oh no! Yeah. And I really like that, and I really think it's quite a nice touch to have the bird there. It's one thing that really annoys me, and I touched on it at the beginning. The author refers to the bird as the yellow one the whole time. Like, not the bird, not the yellow bird.
Yellow one.
The yellow one. And I don't know why that annoys me so much. That's a
very
personal
bizarre
thing.
Choice.
But yeah, it's definitely a choice. But at the end of the book, Mina comes back to the pub, right, where she spent the beginning of the book, where she met Peter, who told her about the bird. She actually sees Peter again at some point, and he's like, "Oh, you're back. That's amazing." And she's like, "Well, actually, no. Can I buy the bird?" And he's like, "No, Tim, the guy who, was going to buy the bird's probably forgotten about it anyway." Which, okay, I can let that go. I can let it go. It's not important. But she's at the cafe or the pub. She sat outside with her glass of wine and her coffee, and her coffee isn't the same as it used to be, because now she's not used to the bitter nature of it.
Yeah, so it tastes weird.
She's kind of dreading this glass of wine a little bit. And throughout the story, she's indicated that she has been sketching these people, and one of these people that she sketched was someone who she affectionately sort of nicknamed the android, because it was someone that she had seen in the street before or something that had pretty much no expression on their face. And she's walking along, doing a little bit. She's sitting at the cafe, not walking along. That would be quite a challenge. And she's drinking her coffee that she doesn't really like, and she's thinking about the glass of wine that she's about to pick up. And she sees out the corner of her eye the android. Like, this is a bit weird. Yeah. Isn't it, actually?
And you could have even just ended it there.
Yeah.
And the question is up in the air and we're fine. But no, we have to really just, if you didn't understand every reader, we really just want to hammer this idea into your head to make sure that you know that there is definitely a second book coming.
And she's distracted by this android, and a man comes and sits down at her table, and she's made a little bit of a song and dance about how, back in the olden days before I went to the coop, I would have put a scarf or something on the table so that no one would sit on that seat. But she's not really paying attention to him. He says, "Can I have the seat?" She says, "Yeah." Watching this android, she's like, "You know what? I think I should probably go and say something." Wait a minute, is that Madeline?
Yeah.
I need to go and talk to Madeline. So
she just happens to be there.
By the way, so she gets up to go and talk to Madeline, and suddenly she's like surrounded on all sides, and she looks back to this guy at the table who suddenly seems very tall, and very like quite
weird
looking. There's something about him, and
you could have even have ended it there, and that would have been okay.
But they do not. And A.M. Shine ends the novel with this man basically turning to her, and Madeline and this android sort of like
so bad.
in a kind of convoy behind him, and they're all like, "They've been watching you this
they're
whole
here,
time,
Mina, and they've been watching you this whole time." And then it ends, and it's like,
that's like, to me, the ultimate way to go from a 5-star horror experience
to go to like a 2.
I think I can't give it a 2. I think it has to be a 3.
I'm giving it a 4.
I hate
I love this book.
that ending.
I really do.
I do have, as we say, a few problems with it, but it's just, I think, me being finicky, and I am. That was my brief rap career. And I think that is something that I need to get over. And I definitely would read it again. I just won't read to the end.
I don't think it's something you need to get over. That's a terrible ending.
No, not the ending.
Oh, okay.
Like the bits and pieces throughout.
Oh, yeah, no, the little plot holes. We talked about this yesterday.
One of them that kind of boggles me a little bit, but I can completely drop this one, is the fact that they have the birds that they go and find up in the top of the trees. I feel like they can bring them back, and they could have been like feeding them up and breeding them and eating them.
But you got like.
But they have got limited resources, and if you're using the limited resources on the birds,
they can only eat so much, and they can't feed the birds because they can't feed themselves.
Yeah. So it's a bit. I like that everything apart from Mina not turning around, I can explain away, and I can be like, you know what, fine. That ending is tragic.
It's so bad.
Hate it so much, and I really can't put the blame on A.M. Shine. Like, obviously we don't know the story. We weren't in the publisher's room,
writer's room,
or the writer's room, and it's very disappointing when you like the whole way through the book have been going, oh my god, yeah, this is it, this is so good, and I said to you, I was about 11% of the way to the end, turned to Alfie and said, I think what is going to happen is the setup for the second book is that Mina's going to go back to the coop, and she's going to try and, find out more about this research.
She's like, I'm going to figure this all out. Kill Bill Volume 2 style.
Yeah, exactly.
Where she's just like, I've crossed this off my list, and now this is the final showdown with the fairies.
It's literally exactly that. And the book, the second one, I looked up the blurb for it earlier today, because the whole way through as well, I was saying to you, I will be buying the second one. I don't understand why you haven't liked the ending. And this is after I find out the twist about Madeline as well, and I'm just thinking, Alfie's got such a bad taste in books. Like, how did you not like that twist about Madeline?
I love the Madeline.
It's because it's a really good twist.
Good, yeah.
And then this is the blurb for the second book, which is called Stay in the Light. It says, you may have escaped, but you'll never be free. After her terrifying experience at the hands of the Watchers, Mina has escaped to a cottage in the west coast of Ireland. She obsessively researches her former captors, desperate to find any way to prolong the safety of humankind. That's all fine.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with that. When Mina encounters a stranger near her home, she fears the worst, for she knows the figure is not what it seems. Soon the people she has encountered start to disappear.
Again, fine.
She knows the Watcher's power is growing. She flees for her life, but when she reports her fears, she finds her sanity questioned.
My least favourite trope in anything is when we have to spend needless time throughout the book of someone going, "This is happening," and people going, "No, it's not."
And
I hate that. It's so frustrating.
There is not one part of me that finds it believable that Mina, who we've learned over the course of this book, she would not go to authorities.
No.
She would go and either leave it or take it on herself. can she convince people that the Watchers are real? I don't care. Like, I don't care. And ready to strike, or will she suffer the fate that she's dread, or will she suffer the fate she has dreaded since she first encountered the malevolent being?
It's all of the cheesy parts of the first story in a blurb.
It's everything. This book was very, very, very clearly written because the first one was either doing well or was about to do well.
The first one did extremely well.
Yeah.
It came out on Kindle Unlimited and loads of people read it. It was one of those like, it's a masterclass. It's like from the first novel of A.M. Shine and he's absolutely blown out of the water, etc., etc., etc. It's already had a movie deal and been made into a movie straight away. So it clearly did well. And to me, it reads like a book that has been written simply because they were like, well, the last one made loads of money, so let's make another one.
Now, this is like a really interesting point as well. Someone has commented on this, only from today, interestingly. This review was left today. Stay in the Light is a sequel to The Watchers. This is an occasion where I think you do not need to read the first book in order.
No, you do need to read.
Oh, you do need to read the first book in order to appreciate the second. In which case, everything I was about to say just is forgotten.
Chuck it down the water.
So let's just leave that point.
Okay.
But people are literally like reviewing this at the moment. Like the last few reviews have actually come over the last couple of days.
Yeah, it only just came out. Like in the last month or so, I think.
No way. No. It was released in 2022, I think.
No, publication date 10th of October 2024. It was like last week.
Wait, so this book hadn't even come out when we selected The Watchers?
No. I only did it. I only selected it because I knew the movie was coming out.
Oh my goodness. I did not realise
Yeah, so this is like literally just come out.
Oh, but now I want to read it.
Well, read it then.
I don't...
You can read it and tell me what it's like because I'm not going to read it.
The problem is, right, it's a book that it's £5 on Kindle.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a bad price for a book, but I hated the premise of it and I don't like the premise of the book as in this blurb form. It is 280 pages again, so it's the same length. And I have to say, to the credit of the first book, it was so easy to read. I read it over a couple of days. I didn't sit down and just read through it.
I listened to the audiobook this time.
Yeah.
Mostly. I read bits, but I mostly just listened to the audiobook and found that to be excellent.
Yeah, the narrator was really good.
The narrator was incredible. She was really good Irish accent. She nails particularly Madeline, every character's like specific way of speaking.
Yeah.
Really with Kira as well. The like little high pitched voice that she has is so good. Yeah, I loved it. I loved the audiobook for that.
What I am gonna say is pick up the book, read it. You can make your decision on the ending. You can read the sequel if you'd like. If you would like to read the sequel, please tell us about it in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments. If you're watching on Spotify, or listening on Spotify, should I say, please let us know in the comments over there as well, because I genuinely want to know if it is just us who feels this way about the ending, or whether or not it's a thing that people feel this way. Having a very quick, brief look at the reviews for The Watchers, it's got 4.3 stars. It has a handful, only a few 1-star reviews, and it's basically saying that they didn't like it. It's not saying they didn't like the ending, it's that they said that they didn't like the book itself. I think it was did you see it?
There was a 1-star review that has the tagline very good.
Very good. I was looking at this one that said appalling ending.
Oh no, I was looking at very good from Ski Bear.
Yeah, I think.
Although that seems to have been written last year before the book came out. Wait,
This is for The Watchers.
Oh, it's for The Watchers.
Okay.
I thought this was for the new one.
Yeah, which it was a long time before. Actually, I feel like I've seen this cover in the bookshop as well. The Watchers cover is beautiful.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's so
whoever
pretty.
the artist that did that is fantastic.
Now, we obviously ordered the Kindle book, which came with the movie cover.
The awful movie cover. Which is just, I hate it. I hate it so much.
We were looking at the cover just before we started recording the podcast, and there are 4 people on the cover, obviously, because there are 4 people in the coop. And we literally can't
it's awful.
match up.
Obviously, I know which one Daniel is. He's the only boy. But,
who doesn't look like Daniel.
No. Can you zoom in?
Yeah, slightly. So I think
that's got to be Madeline.
So yeah, there's an older woman, right? I think that's Mina.
She got like a little stick.
Yeah, because Madeline is supposed to be a tall woman, right? She is portrayed from the start as a tall woman.
Yeah.
The tallest person there is Mina.
Yeah.
Who is played by Dakota Fanning. I'm assuming
it's gotta be Dakota
that's
Fanning,
Dakota Fanning, and she just looks like an exact clone of Madeline.
Is Dakota Fanning Irish?
I think she is. Yeah, I think her and her sister are both Irish, but I don't know because I don't know.
Daytona Fanning.
But also, Kira is not played by an actress who looks like Kira in my head, which probably isn't an issue. But like just looking at the lineup, Daniel's supposed to be like a greasy.
He looks like
kid.
an angry kid in this picture.
Yeah, he looks angry, but he looks like he's got his life together.
I'm gonna beat you up. Yeah.
And then like Mina is very, very tall, and she doesn't look.
She's got a satchel with a sketchbook in.
Yeah, that's definitely got to be her. Sorry, this is such an aside. Highly recommend checking out the cover for this.
And go watch the movie and tell us if the movie's good, because I'm not going to watch that. I mean, I might watch that. It's one of those things that I'm like one day in 7 years, I'll be like, oh yeah, The Watchers.
Do you know what the other thing is?
What's the other thing?
Mina's supposed to be there for like 2 months or something. Imagine if this is the first day she gets here. None of them look like they've spent. They all look like they've just arrived
there as well. Yeah.
So I think that's what's throwing me off about Kira
that
as
is something that I do really like is the descriptions of them all.
Because they've just like
the hands.
Horrible.
Do you remember the hands description? There's a really great description, like I think sort of halfway through the book, where Mina looks down at her hands and she says like she used to think her hands were quite small. But with all the fat come off them, her fingers look really long and wiry. And I remember thinking, she's like washing herself and she like looks at her hands. And that's like peak gothic horror. Like just looking at your hands and being like, oh God, so good.
Speaking of that, one of the other themes I really liked about the book was that because it was mirrored in the coop and they have to stay awake all night, Mina's been like, forced to look at her reflection.
Yeah, and just watch her like self just decline, yeah.
And this is the other thing I don't understand about Kira, because I think she's supposed to be a larger woman.
Yeah.
And she's depicted as that all the way through the book, and I'm sure they've been there for over a year, and they're eating a handful of berries a day.
Nuts
So I don't quite I think there's just stuff like that where A.M. Shine got so into the characterization of all his people that
some things don't quite
Some things
follow.
Dropped out.
Yeah.
But I really I think all of the characters are so unique and individual as well. I think
agree.
Kira is very Kira. Daniel is very Daniel. Like, you can't, even in speech, get them mixed up, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because Alfie just shifted in his seat and it just became a forehead.
It's just, if you're watching on the video, you just saw a very interesting close-up of my face.
So, now is the time in the podcast. Do you have anything else you want to say about The Watchers, by the way?
No.
Right, okay. So I am saying to Alfie, it's November. The next book is November anyway. This is the October read. For November, I want to do something a bit more cozy, a bit more like just before Christmas. I think we'll do a Christmas read in December. But I want to do something that's quite cozy and relaxed and nice. So I have 2 books for you to choose from today. This is the part of the Paperback Possibility Podcast where I or Alfie come to the other one and say, hello, I've got 2 books for you. Hello, Alfie. I've got 2 books for you, 1 or 2. You have to pick which one we're going to read next month. So I've taken all of the stress out of your decision because I've got 2 wonderful books.
That's more stress.
So the first one, you'll be semi-familiar with this because back in, I think, February,
I remember.
We had a book called Legends and Lattes.
I loved Legends and Lattes.
It was one of your favourites.
I think is my favourite book that we've read.
Yeah.
This whole
through
year.
the podcast.
Through the podcast, yeah.
I think is brilliant. But this book is the sequel/prequel.
The requel.
The requel. This is Bone Shops. No, it's not. This is Bookshops
and
Bone Dust.
Bone Shops and Book Dust.
This is Bookshops and Bone Dust. A heartwarming, I cannot read now, cozy fantasy from the author of Legends and Lattes. So
good.
If you remember, Legends and Lattes was brilliant. It was about an orc who wanted to set up a coffee shop, and that was the story.
Oh, and it's so good.
It's so cozy and heartwarming. Like, genuinely deserves all of the TikTok love because it is a TikTok book, basically. And Bookshops and Bone Dust was the sequel book, but it's an actual prequel.
Yeah,
and
it was
it's
written
about
afterwards, but it's about
Viv, who is our main character, and it's about her life and what sort of led her to making that decision. So this book, First Loves, Secondhand Books, Epic Adventures. Viv's career with the renowned mercenary company Rackham's Ravens isn't going as planned. Wounded during the hunt for a powerful necromancer, she's packed off against her will to recuperate in the sleepy beach town of Merk, so far from the action that she worries she'll never be able to return to it. What's a thwarted soldier of fortune to do? Spending her hours at the struggling bookshop in the company of its foul-mouthed proprietor is the last thing that Viv would have predicted, even though it may be exactly what she needs. Still, adventure isn't far away. A suspicious traveller in grey, a gnome with a chip on her shoulder, a summer fling, and an improbable number of skeletons prove Merk to be more eventful than Viv could ever have expected. Sometimes right things happen at the wrong time. Sometimes what we need isn't what we seek, and sometimes we find ourselves in the stories we experience together. That's our first choice.
Great stuff.
You can decide whether or not we're going to read that or another book that I have chosen. And this is called The Lonely Hearts Quiz League, which is apparently the most uplifting feel-good book to curl up with this autumn by Lauren Farnsworth. This is about a quiz league. Would you believe it? When Bryony, Harry and Jamie step into the Five Bells, each has their own motive for being drawn into the glow of the pub. Harry, who is recently single, can't face his silent flat. Jamie, new to London with her boyfriend, longs to find a fun crowd. And Bryony is trying to locate the promising young woman she was before a positive pregnancy test set her life on a different course. When they spot the advert to join a quiz team and enter a tournament, each signs up, unaware that the organiser, Donna, has her own reason to avoid thinking about home. After a few evenings, the strangers begin to see they have more in common than they realised. But when everyone's secrets are finally out on the table, will it sabotage the team's chances of making it through? So this one, I don't think it's like a murder mystery. I don't think it's like...
It reads like
it's reading
that.
like
Yeah.
it.
It reads like they're all going to be killed.
I don't think so. It's four lonely strangers,
Even this picture.
one impossible dream. Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
The picture is like a bar with all the bar stools, and one bar stool is knocked over.
And drink.
And the drink. So that to me reads
Maybe
like one
it
of them is
is.
going to be dead.
So it says, introducing the red hot quizzy peppers.
Oh,
We've got Donna, whose specialist subject is general knowledge.
I thought she was the organiser.
She can also be in the team.
And she?
I don't know. Jamie, whose specialist subject is art. Bryony's is history. Harry's is entertainment. Everyone seems to enjoy this book, allegedly. It's
Allegedly.
It's 4.3 stars out of 53. And I am going to read this at some point, but are we going to read it for the podcast? The reviews seem okay. It's a story of friendship, apparently. So they're both cozy books. Alfie, what do you think? Do you want to go for the safe bookshops and bone dust? Do you want to go for perhaps it's about a murder, the lonely quiz?
If it is about a murder, I'm much more interested.
But we are putting the watchers to bed.
Okay. Good night.
Good night,
Good
the
night,
watchers. And then we are picking between Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldry. Keeping in mind that we have read Travis Baldry already in the podcast. There are 2 books left to read, no pressure. There is one for November and one for December, so please let us know what you would like to see us read in December as well. Bonus points if it's a Christmas theme.
It's only Christmas. It will be a Christmas book.
Yeah,
definitely. So don't send us anything else.
And then for the penultimate book of the podcast, will it be The Lonely Hearts Quiz League, which is the most uplifting feel-good book to curl up with this autumn by Lauren Farnsworth? Or will it be Bookshops and Bone Dust, a heartwarming, cozy fantasy from the author of Legends and Latte?
It's not even a competition, it's Bookshops and Bone Dust.
Oh my goodness, who could have seen that coming? So just to let you know, this one is 354 pages.
Yeah.
And the Lonely Hearts Quiz League was 394, so you've managed to
40 pages.
cut 40 pages. I highly recommend, if you want to read along with us, go and
read Legends and Lattes.
Literally.
Just go and read Legends and Lattes anyway. It's so good.
So do a little double back. They're both currently $4.99 on Kindle. This book, Bone Shops and Book Dust, I cannot say this shop name. Bookshops and Bone Dust has been £8 the whole year. It's been $8.99 because I was going to buy it in February and I ended up not doing it. So we are going back into it. I think we're both going into it without reading the first one again.
I'm not going to read the first one again.
There we go. So let us know what you think if you read along as well. Let us know if you liked The Watchers, if you did read that too. Massive thank you to Alfie for bringing The Watchers into my life as well. I hate you for bringing the last 5 pages into it.
I know, it's so bad, isn't it?
But I really enjoyed that experience.
Yeah, it's a great book. Love The Watchers. Read it.
Read
4
it.
out of 5. Just don't read the last 5 pages, then it's 5 out of 5.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for listening to the podcast or watching it if you watched on YouTube or listened to it on Spotify. I couldn't remember the name of the other site there.
Or YouTube Music.
Okay.
Because they'll be on there, because podcasts automatically get added onto.
There you go. Thank you so much. Alfie, do you have anything you would like to say to the lovely listeners / watchers?
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you lots. I've been Ashleigh.
And I've been Alfie.
And this is the Paperback Possibility Podcast.